Hey, hello, viewers, listeners, parents, and school children, those students who attend the class, those interested in English language learning. Here I'd like to start with certain definition and purpose. Any language, whatever it is means for communication. We communicate. Communication is an exchange of idea, feelings, innovations, gains and loss, and etc. Either verbally or non-verbally. It can be held in global context or in local context, including at home, in a school, and within community as well. The emphasis of language or communication is not an end, but it is means to end. So if we know the language English effectively, we analyze it, we break down into parts, we know the system, and even focusing on fluency and accuracy, that is not the end of the story. Language function, language use, language purpose is for exchanging ideas, okay, innovations, okay, research findings, okay, gains or loss, etc. But language by itself is means to end. But most people in general and children of students as well fail in English language use, especially they may try to analyze the grammatical and the structural part, but they fail to use the language effectively, either verbally or non-verbal way. Why do you think this is so? May I ask you a few questions? You and I would try to answer these questions for ourselves. And the first one is think of your first language. Do you know who taught you? Or could you remember who taught you your first language, your mother tongue? The second question is, could you remember what aspects did you give high emphasis when you acquired your first language? My question is, for example, did you focus on grammar aspect or language function aspect when you acquire your first language? The next question is, how do you grade yourself, your level of your competence in your mother tongue, your first language? And the other question is, how many years did it take for you to be fluent enough in your mother tongue or your first language? Do you know the number of years you took to learn effectively to use your first language? Here are my answers for myself, and I taught my first language, and I don't know. I didn't know for the second answer who taught me my first language, but I acquired it. When I was with my parents in the community, I acquired it subconsciously because I was exposed to all language aspects without grading. Okay, so my parents speak, my uncles, aunts, neighbors, my brother and sisters, my elder and younger, all speak the language, and I subconsciously acquired it, but I don't know who taught me. I couldn't remember even which aspect of the language. For example, whether grammar or that of language use, I had no idea about aspects I focused, but I know that I used the language. I started by using the language. And the next is, by now, I am competent enough in my mother tongue. I think in it, I can write and read in it. I can competently share, fluently speak in it. This seems paradox. It took me not more than 5 years because I started using it when I was 2 years old. And I can guess that up to 5 years and up to seven, as researchers again confirms that children acquire the language fully. But other than that, I personally don't know how many years it took me to acquire the language. But I know that I started using, or else I'm familiar with it with my children and the children around within 2 years. Children start using their mother tongue. But what are the problems? Or because of many other constraints, like the school system, the way the teachers approach the language, and even the way parents use the language at home, and even the community system. Learning language, especially English language, took me and the others several years, many years. It's better to say even. And still, students are with gap and with deficiency of using the language. But language consists of accuracy and fluency. In other words, the language system, the structure, the rule of grammar, the breakdown of the language is one part, and the language use, the function aspect is another. But in acquisition, language function is highly focused. Language use, you have to use, or the learners have to use the language or exchange ideas in the language rather than focusing about the language. That is a structural aspect. But if we consider that when you use the language aspect all, be it grammar, the structure, the rule, the parts of speech, words, context, cultures, ideas, many more things are within the language we use. Therefore, whenever we use a language, indirectly we learn everything all. But when we highly focus on the grammar part, the root part, we ignore the meaning part of the language, the main role of the language that is expected to be played. So language function is an umbrella for accusation, and within there is a grammar part, and that shouldn't be neglected as well. Because especially though in academic area, written form of a communication needs accuracy at large and fluency as well. Therefore, the fluency and the accuracy, language function and language forms are integrated in our channel that we are going to start delivering the lesson. Our channel is like a good street that leads the passengers to highway which take them to the individual destiny. So the unique features or characteristics of our channel is the content we offer or deliver is problem-based and at the same time solution-oriented. The second feature is language use have got high emphasis. We consider language use and our presentation is in the language, creating almost equivalent to authentic context, but that does not mean we ignore the rules and the system, especially the grammar aspects. But grammar can be taught in a way that it enhances language communication. So the second issue is that customers Needs and feedbacks are highly emphasized and collected regularly so that the modification can be held accordingly. So both language acquisition, language learning for adults and for children are accommodated because in whole language approach, all individuals can learn because can pick up what he or she needs. But we majorly now focus on language acquisition and creating the scenario dealing with children acquisition, storytelling, story analysis, presentation, and hands-on tasks. So before coming into the beginning, let us start looking into common problems or basic problems that used to hinder our children and ourselves in schools and in different places, at home even more than that or beyond that, can be chunked into categories. And let us see before getting into the channel, getting into the lesson, let us identify and discuss upon these problems. The problems are chunked into different categories. For example, the first problem is related to parents. The second is teacher-related gaps. The third is the children or the learner-related challenges. The first is English language itself related problems. The fifth is school culture and school context related problems, along with the country's curriculum and language policies. These are not the end of the list, but you can add more. Basically, these are parties that affect child's or else adults' language learning features. We will see one after the other. The first one is parents-related challenges. What does it mean by how parents source for certain challenges for children to learn? The first one is parents' impatience. That is, most parents are busy with something else and they don't want to pay attention to their children, especially their concern, their questions, or else to deal with the language and any other learning aspects. The second, they don't pay attention, but they lack again skills and knowledge, positive attitude towards the language itself and its function. The parents may be unable to choose child-friendly resources, colorful resources, resources with interesting stories, attractive and catchy items. If they are unable to do that, children lack access. The next point is irregularity of being with their children or irregular time and inconsistency of practicing with children. Parents should give regular time to be with their children and to talk about and to deal with their lessons. Probably it may be at night before bedtime or early in the morning, consistently and regularly, so that children can practice learning the language and asking questions and retelling the story and so forth. But parents do not give regular time, but they address, if any, irregularly. The other is setting. Children lack good setting, attractive situations with different resources to be there and to learn and to see visually different things at home and in a context. So parents are able to provide good setting, good situation for their children. And this is again related with and beliefs and the practices of their own learning and about English language. Parents think in a way that they learn that particular language and they lack knowledge about what is going on through researches and through language acquisition cases. They try to address in a way is that they will learn it as students. But things are changing, technologies are flourishing. Therefore, our attitudes as a parent and the way we address should be it change it accordingly. If I do so much, let's come to the second point is teacher related. This is mainly about the teacher intermingled problems. For example, the teacher may be less communicative and less learner-centered approach user in a classroom. Teachers may dominate the class and segregate part of the language, take part of the language, discrete part of the language. For example, article as a lesson and deal a long period of time about the language, not in the language. The second is depending too much on syllabus and textbooks or less authentic materials. Teachers, as they were prescribed from authorities, they focus on the textbook and the syllabus given so as to cover the contents and the topics. Therefore, they don't want to be creative and communicative. There are less engaging activities. Even they fragment the presentation and use materials without adapting to the child level. The other is not being real model. Teachers may not feel confident and well engaged in the language used by themselves even. They may not feel comfort and confident in use of this English language. As a result, they don't be the real model for learners to learn and to converse with. And teachers may be too formal in classroom because children by nature are restless and do not like to be formal. They like to learn in playful context, engaging in different activities. But children cannot listen a long period of time paying attention for the teachers sitting back on the chair and writing on the exercise book for a long period of time. They dislike, but teachers should be creative rather than being too formal and rigid. This affects again child's learning. The other is their authoritative approach, dominance in classroom. They become more active than engaging learners. As a matter of fact, in teaching English or the language, and whatever the lesson is, nowadays teachers rather students should be more active than that of student, because students learn, the learners are the students, therefore teachers should facilitate the situation and teachers should prepare a good context for them rather than being more active and explanatory. There is the inability to integrate different language skills. For example, listening and speaking should be offered simultaneously because you cannot align in natural setting language skills. For example, you listen and speak, you take turn and converse with the participant. Rather, you can maybe chunk into listening and speaking, reading and writing. Reading and writing is more of academic, but through simple integration, you can make them learn or approach in such a way. But teachers' inability to do that, again, causes certain problem. Before the next, let you think of how teachers and parents affect children's language learning. Think over it, an area we discussed a bit. I tried to explain and add more for yourself and understand it. You have 2 minutes.